Hello everyone, I'm Jeremy Jakin and welcome to Wild West China. So today I'm going to talk about a bike trip I did with a couple of friends to western Sichuan, which is a Tibetan area of Sichuan province. And I'll show you some of the highlights of the region, like Seda, Tagong, LITANG, Danba, Kangding, some of the passes I go over, and some other nice scenery, and some things about the local people. So we started our trip in northwest Sichuan province, not too far from the Tibetan and Qinghai province border. And we made our way back over about 8 days back to near Chengdu. To get out there, we had to take a 2-day bus ride, so it's definitely far to get out there, but more than worth it. So the bus ticket's about $40, and then they charge you $20 to bring your bike. And you stop overnight in Kangding, which is the biggest city out west, and a great base for exploring the region. And then the next day you had another 8 hours or so to get to Ganzi. If you don't feel like being trapped on a 2-day roller coaster ride with stinky farmers barfing every 10 minutes, you could always fly to Kangding, which can save a lot of time, even if you miss some nice scenery. There's plenty of amazing things out in this region too. Over 100 kilometers west of there is a town called ZHUQING, which isn't really famous, like if you looked it up, but I'd stayed there before and it's amazing. Not too far north of Ganzi is Seda, which is one of the most amazing sites I've actually seen in China. It's the largest Tibetan Buddhist institute in the world, but unfortunately foreigners can't get in now. I think politics and religion has had a little bit of a conflict, and they've torn down about half of the place. And it also looks like a tinderbox. I mean, the place looks like it could easily go up in flames, so I'm not sure the truth about the reason why they're doing that. Down to the south, you've got LITANG, and that's about 250 kilometers away, and that's the biggest town probably out west besides Kangding. That's become quite a big town, and that's a good gateway to get into Yunnan province through Daocheng or Shangri-La too. So we left Ganzi and got a ride to the top of the pass. I think it was about 20 or 30 kilometers to the top, and we went down. The road's obviously beautiful and well paved, but there are a decent amount of trucks, and there's not a big shoulder, which is also a little bit of a disappointment, but it's definitely more than worth it as far as the views go. We got to Luhua that evening, and while we were walking to dinner, I befriended a woman that was walking beside us, and she mentioned she sang nearby in a bar that evening, so we went there, and that was interesting to see the local culture of the singing and the music, and they also gave us tons of free beers because they don't see that many foreigners. Not that those beers do much. A lot of the beers in China are about 2.5%, so you have to drink quite a few to even feel anything, but nevertheless, we had a great evening, and it was good times. So the singer actually gets tips, not directly. They buy kind of a cloth or like sort of like a wreath to put around the singer. And so I assume that's how they're making money, is from tips on how well they sing. So we continued on and passed a place called Dawu, and then you go up to a pass, and right near there's a place called the Dragon Grasslands. And that's one of the nicest sites since our first day, since we left Ganzi. And then we continued on and passed a place called Bame, and then arrived in Tagong, which is where I have a friend, a guy from the Czech Republic who has a hostel and a brewery nearby. And we took a couple days off there, and you can explore and do some hikes and tons of neat stuff. Just next to my friend's hostel, you could check out a temple and walk around that area, and then you could hike up behind the hostel, up the mountain. You could get up to the top in about, I don't know, an hour and 15 minutes or so. It's a steep climb. There's only a path about halfway, and then you just kind of walk up on your own. But you get views of Mount YALA in the northeast, and in the south you can see Mount Ganga on a clear day, the highest mountain in Sichuan. So we had a great time hanging out with Max and his wife Coco, who's a native of the area. We got to drink some of his great beers down at his brewery in Xinduqiao, about 35 kilometers south of Tagong. And it was also her birthday while we stayed there, so we got to have a nice hot pot dinner and stuff. And yeah, so if you're staying in that area, you could go to the Kampa Cafe in Tagong, and that's where they run a hostel and have some great food. And then we got back on the road. Max first took us the next day to a monastery. We had kind of a funny but awkward experience in the temple because we went in and the monk was already a little annoyed. The other guy with us, an Australian guy named Ryan, had kind of touched some of the drums, so the monk mentioned, don't touch it. And a couple of minutes later, Max showed us it was a picture of the Dalai Lama behind one of the, there was a cloth covering it. And then we walked outside. We were waiting for 10 minutes. Finally, Ryan and Max came out, and what happened was they asked the monk if they could see it. He said no, and they ended up, I guess, looking at it anyway. Well, the picture of the Dalai Lama ended up falling down and hitting the ground. So the guy was just freaked out, was super pissed, of course, because, they tried to say they didn't, I guess they said they didn't touch it the second time, but it hit the floor, so it was kind of obvious that something was going on or just extremely bad luck. We went nearby there, and just about a couple kilometers away is the birthplace of the 11th Dalai Lama. I guess it's 150 years old or something like that. So kind of interesting. That was near Bame, about a half hour, 40 minutes from Tagong. You also pass by Mount YALA and get a great view of the mountain there before we got dropped off. And from there, it's a downhill ride about 80 kilometers to Danba. So we it was already late in the afternoon. We didn't start till 3:30, so we ended up just going down a couple hours and camping before town. Luckily, there was some good camping spots. So we arrived in Danba, which is probably the biggest town in the region since Kangding. And this region's famous for these Himalayan towers. These, I assume, had two functions, actually. One was probably to protect the food. I've seen the doors that were about 10 or 15 feet off the ground. So if bandits or if there was wartime, you could protect your food up in these towers. And also, I guess it was used to show prestige and that you did have wealth. So they were made between, I guess, 500 and 1800 years ago. So most of the people on this trip, of course, were Tibetan people. There's, I guess you could say, three main groups. The province of Tibet, where Lhasa is one group. And then up north in Qinghai province, you have the Amdo group. And then in the east, where we were, are the Kham people. So even though it's not called Tibet, as far as people go, as far as physical geography, it's the Tibetan Plateau. They all speak a similar language, but different dialects. So when you get to Danba and some of the canyons around that area and headed towards Chengdu on the eastern edge of the Tibetan Plateau, most of the people there are the Qiang people. And there's, of course, some Tibetans and Han Chinese in that area as well.
No one's helping. They're giving moral support, Eric.
So the food's not too bad. You have more of meat and potatoes and stuff. The Tibetan Plateau is not exactly known for its bananas, pineapples, and coconuts. Obviously, around 4,000 meters or 10,000 feet, you're not going to get a lot of things that would grow in a tropical area. But it's not bad. It's not as spicy as the other Sichuan food, so it's kind of a good break from that. And there's a few Chinese restaurants, obviously, around all these bigger towns, so you get a good mix of different things. So we head through some canyons, and then we get a little bit higher up in elevation. And you can either go over ZHUQING or BALANG to get back to Chengdu. Both are over 4,000 meters, but we took ZHUQING because it has less traffic, so I like it a little bit more. I've done that mountain plenty of times before, so I arranged for us to get a ride to the top. We went down the mountain. It was super cold, but we stayed in a village at night. It was raining the next day, so we ended the trip there. We had a great trip. It's always fun to catch up and bond with old friends from back in the day. They were a little nervous about some of the traffic, and there was a lot of trash in some areas, which was a little disappointing, but overall they enjoyed the trip. So you can see one of the reasons why I moved to Chengdu, because I have access to some of the most amazing areas in China. And you should definitely come out and check it out. If you are interested in a bike tour, I do lead tours in Chengdu and around this part of China, so I'll post some links below. If you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe or share, and hope you make it out to this part of China. It's an amazing place.